The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Ambassador Kira sat in her designated seat, staring at the holographic displays that showed the current state of former Kaleth space. Where once there had been military installations and weapon factories, there were now schools, hospitals, and research centers. Elder Roth deactivated the historical records and looked directly at her. You asked what one backward species could do to threaten an empire. Now you know. Kira's voice was barely a whisper. But surely that was long ago. Humanity must have changed. They must have grown soft, become more civilized. A new voice spoke from the observer section. Captain Lee of the human vessel Watchkeeper transmitted this message to our monitoring stations yesterday. Elder Voss activated his communication system, and a calm human voice filled the chamber. Greetings to the Galactic Council. This is Captain Lee of the deep space monitoring vessel Watchkeeper. We continue to observe interstellar relations with great interest. We have noted the Nexus Empire's recent expansion proposals and trust that all parties will remember the importance of peaceful coexistence. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. The message was polite, friendly even. But every species representative understood the meaning underneath. They're still watching, Elder Roth explained unnecessarily. Every fleet movement, every territorial dispute, every diplomatic crisis. There isn't a corner of the galaxy that human ships haven't mapped. Ambassador Kira looked around the chamber at representatives from dozens of species. How many of you have encountered these monitoring ships? Nearly every hand, claw, tentacle, and appendage in the chamber was raised. They don't interfere, explained Ambassador Tak of the Meridian Republic. They simply unobserve, and occasionally send friendly reminders about the value of diplomatic solutions. Elder Voss brought up another display, this one showing current, deep space sensor readings. Hundreds of small contacts moved through the void, following no apparent pattern except to be everywhere at once. The human monitoring network spans the entire galaxy, he said. They know about every military buildup before it happens, every potential conflict before it starts, every species that might be considering aggressive expansion. Dr. Maya, humanity's representative, finally spoke from her position in the diplomatic section. Her voice carried the same gentle tone that had marked human interactions for 8 centuries. The Kaleth quarantine will be lifted in 43 years, she said matter-of-factly. Their rehabilitation is proceeding exceptionally well. They've learned to resolve conflicts through negotiation rather than conquest. They've developed remarkable artistic and scientific achievements. Most importantly, they've learned to see other species as partners rather than prey. She paused, looking directly at Ambassador Kira. Every species deserves the chance to grow beyond their violent impulses. The Kaleth took that chance and became something beautiful. Other species have made the same choice when presented with the same opportunity. Elder Roth activated another display showing various sectors of galactic space. The Thaxan hegemony chose diplomacy over conquest when human observers noted their fleet buildup near neutral space. The Zephyr Collective abandoned their slave-raiding operations when humanity offered them alternative economic models. 17 different species have voluntarily reformed their military policies rather than risk the Kaleth treatment. And those who refused? Kira asked, though part of her didn't want to know. There have been 3 other quarantine zones established over the past 8 centuries, Dr. Maya replied. The Vorthan Empire, the Crimson Syndicate, and the Apex Dominion. All are currently in various stages of rehabilitation. All will eventually rejoin galactic civilization when they've proven they can coexist peacefully with their neighbors. Their implications hit Kira like a physical blow. You mean humanity has been managing the entire galaxy? Not managing, Dr. Maya corrected gently. Gardening. We ensure that no species faces extinction at the hands of another. We provide guidance to civilizations that have lost their way. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. Elder Voss nodded approvingly. When the Keth plague threatened to destroy my people's homeworld, it was human medical ships that arrived first with the cure. When the Stellar Consortium tried to monopolize trade routes through Nexus space, it was human negotiators who arranged the compromise that kept commerce flowing freely. We don't interfere in galactic politics, Dr. Maya continued. Species are free to govern themselves as they choose, to form whatever alliances they wish, to pursue whatever economic models work for them. We ask only that they respect the right of other species to exist. Ambassador Kira looked around the chamber again, seeing her fellow representatives in a new light. How long has this been going on? Since the day after the first Calith ship was destroyed, Elder Roth replied. Humanity announced their intention to serve as galactic guardians and invited any species that disagreed to discuss the matter. No one chose to disagree. The recording system activated again, playing archived footage from 8 centuries ago. A much younger Elder Roth stood at a similar podium, addressing the council after the Calith defeat. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our understanding, his younger self said. They have also demonstrated wisdom and restraint that gives us hope. This council formally recognizes humanity's self-appointed role as guardians of galactic peace. The vote had been unanimous. Dr. Maya stood and walked to the center of the chamber. Ambassador Kira, your empire is welcome to expand through peaceful means. Humanity would be happy to facilitate trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and cooperative research projects. We have colonies throughout the Outer Rim that would benefit from contact with your people. But Earth remains off-limits? Earth will always remain off-limits, Dr. Maya confirmed, not because we fear invasion, but because the galaxy needs to remember what happens when humanity is threatened. That memory keeps the peace. As the council session concluded, Kira found herself walking beside Dr. Maya toward the exit. Do your people ever resent the burden you've taken on? She asked. Dr. Maya smiled. Every human knows that somewhere in the galaxy, there are species living in peace because we watch over them. Children playing safely because we ensure their worlds are protected. Civilizations growing and flourishing because we prevent others from destroying them. How could we resent that? They reached the transport bay where diplomatic shuttles waited to carry representatives back to their ships. The monitoring never stops? Kira asked. Never, Dr. Maya confirmed. At this moment, there are human ships in every sector of the galaxy. Watching, learning, ready to respond if anyone threatens the peace we've all worked so hard to build. As her shuttle departed the council station, Kira looked out at the stars and tried to imagine the vast network of human ships moving through the darkness. Guardians who asked for nothing, except that their neighbors live in peace. On a small world, in former Caleth space, Elder Trend tended his garden as he did every morning. His great-grandfather had once commanded fleets that terrorized entire systems. Now the Caleth grew food, created art, and slowly rebuilt their civilization under humanity's patient guidance. A human monitoring station orbited overhead, its automated message repeating continuously. Rehabilitation progress noted. Cultural development exceeds projections. Peaceful coexistence protocols fully integrated. Tren looked up at the stars and whispered the prayer his people had learned to say. Thank you for teaching us to be worthy of them. Similar prayers rose from hundreds of worlds throughout the galaxy. Species that had learned the hard way what happened when they chose violence over diplomacy. Civilizations that had been given a second chance to become something better than they were, and in the depths of space human ships continued their eternal patrol, not conquerors seeking dominion, but gardeners tending the greatest garden ever planted, an entire galaxy learning to live in peace. The lesson had been learned by every species. Those who chose to prey upon the innocent would face humanity's judgment. Not death, but something far more transformative. The chance to become worthy of the stars they inhabited. Earth remained off limits not because humanity feared their neighbors, but because their neighbors had learned to fear disappointing the guardians who watched over them all. The galaxy slept peacefully, protected by those who had chosen to bear the burden of eternal vigilance, and everyone remembered why humans were off limits, not because they were weak, but because they had proven themselves to be the strongest force in the galaxy, a species dedicated to ensuring that strength served creation rather than destruction. The systematic dismantling of the Caleth Empire took place under the watchful eyes of the entire galaxy. Trade routes that had carried Caleth warships now hosted human monitoring stations. Worlds that had once launched conquest fleets now struggled to maintain basic industrial capacity. Admiral Sol coordinated the final phase from her flagship, the Testament, positioned in orbit around the former Caleth capital world. She watched through the viewports as her teams worked with mechanical precision, dismantling the last pieces of military infrastructure that had once threatened peaceful species across 3 star systems. Status report, she requested from her operations chief. All military shipyards have been reduced to base materials. Weapons manufacturing facilities have been converted to civilian industrial plants. The orbital defense platforms have been completely dismantled. He paused. Admiral, they're essentially back to early space age technology. Dr. Kai supervised the cultural reformation teams working on the planet's surface. Her job was perhaps the most important of all, helping the Caleth understand why this had happened to them. You must understand, she explained to the gathered Caleth leaders who had once commanded fleets and armies. This was not done from hatred or desire for revenge. This was done to teach your people something they had forgotten. Former war leader, Thek, the Caleth who had captured Captain Jiho and his crew, sat among the assembly. His crystalline features, once fierce with predatory confidence, now showed only confusion and defeat. What lesson could justify the destruction of our entire civilization? He asked. Dr. Kai activated a holographic display showing images from across the galaxy, trade routes where different species worked together, research stations where multiple civilizations shared knowledge, peaceful colonies where various forms of life coexisted in harmony. The lesson that strength comes from creation, not destruction. That civilizations advance through cooperation, not conquest. That the truly powerful protect the weak, rather than prey upon them. The education program was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human teachers worked alongside reformed Caleth leaders to establish new schools, where young Caleth learned about peaceful coexistence instead of military conquest. Human engineers helped rebuild Caleth infrastructure, but only for civilian purposes. Captain June, whose mining vessel had been converted to a warship during the conflict, now oversaw the construction of agricultural facilities on former military bases. Your people were starving while your government built warships, he told the Caleth workers. We're going to teach you to feed yourselves before you learn to build weapons again. The monitoring system established throughout former Caleth space was more comprehensive than anyone had imagined possible. Orbital stations tracked every energy signature, every communication signal, every sign of technological development. But the monitoring wasn't punitive, it was educational. When Caleth scientists made breakthroughs in medical technology, human observers provided additional resources and guidance. When Caleth artists created works celebrating peace and cooperation, human cultural exchanges helped spread those works to other worlds. General Hana established the protocols that would govern Caleth space for the indefinite future. Every piece of technology more advanced than basic industrial equipment must be approved by the Monitoring Council, she explained to the reformed Caleth government. But approval will be automatic for any technology that serves peaceful purposes. The Caleth had expected punishment, imprisonment, perhaps extinction. What they received instead was the most comprehensive rehabilitation program in galactic history. Dr. Wan led teams that helped convert former weapons factories into centers for scientific research. Your people are intelligent and capable, she told the Caleth engineers she worked with. You've simply been applying your intelligence to the wrong purposes. The transformation wasn't limited to technology. Human sociologists worked with Caleth communities to establish new social structures based on cooperation rather than domination. The rigid military hierarchy that had defined Caleth society was gradually replaced with democratic institutions and civilian leadership. Commander Ray, whose stealth ships had gathered the intelligence that made the swift victory possible, now oversaw the cultural exchange programs. Your people have artistic and philosophical traditions that could contribute greatly to galactic civilization, she told a gathering of Caleth intellectuals. But first you must learn to see other species as equals, not prey. The message that went out to every monitoring station was clear. Success will be measured not by compliance but by genuine change. We're not trying to create a client state. We're trying to create a species worthy of rejoining galactic civilization. The rehabilitation process was monitored by every major species in the galaxy. What they saw challenged everything they thought. They knew about conquest and defeat. The humans weren't extracting tribute or demanding submission. They were investing enormous resources in transforming their former enemies into something better. Captain Nam, who had led the rescue mission that saved Captain Jiho and his crew, now commanded one of the monitoring stations. He received regular reports from across Kaleth space, and what he saw gave him hope. Crime rates are down 70%, he reported to Admiral Saul. Industrial accidents have decreased by half. Educational enrollment has tripled. And most importantly, they're starting to create art that celebrates life rather than death. The Kaleth themselves began to understand what was happening to them. Young Kaleth, who had grown up learning about conquest and domination, were now studying agriculture, medicine, and engineering. They were learning to build rather than destroy. Former Commander Vec, now working as a civilian administrator, received a visit from Dr. Maya, humanity's representative to the Galactic Council. She had come to see the progress firsthand. "Do you understand now why we did this?" she asked him. Vec looked out the window of his office at Kaleth children playing in parks that had once been military training grounds. "You could have destroyed us. Instead, you gave us a chance to become something we never knew we could be." "Every species deserves that chance," Dr. Maya replied. "The tragedy is that some species only take it after they've been forced to." The monitoring stations throughout Kaleth space served another purpose that gradually became clear to galactic observers. They weren't just watching the Kaleth, they were broadcasting everything they saw to the rest of the galaxy. Every species could see the daily reports of Kaleth progress. They could watch former warriors learning to be farmers, teachers, and doctors. They could see an entire civilization transforming itself from a culture of conquest to a culture of creation. Admiral Sol's final report to Human Command was brief. The Kaleth Empire no longer exists. In its place, we have 43 world governments, learning to cooperate with each other and with other species. Military capability has been eliminated. Cultural transformation is proceeding ahead of schedule. Estimated time until full rehabilitation, 43 years. The galaxy had watched humanity defeat a powerful empire without destroying it. They had watched humans transform enemies into potential friends. Most importantly, they had watched humanity demonstrate that true strength lay not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to rebuild. The lesson resonated across thousands of worlds. Species that had been considering military expansion reconsidered their plans. Empires that had been eyeing their neighbors' resources chose diplomatic solutions instead. As the monitoring stations settled into their long-term mission of watching over Kaleth space, a new message went out on all galactic frequencies. The Kaleth Rehabilitation Project serves as a model for any species that chooses violence over peace. Transformation is always preferable to destruction, but the choice must be made voluntarily. Those who refuse to make it will have it made for them. The galaxy had learned something new about humanity. They weren't just protectors, they were teachers. And the lesson they taught was simple. Civilizations could always become better than they were, but some needed more help learning how than others. War Commander Vec stood on the bridge of the Kaleth Empire's most powerful dreadnought, watching his sensor displays with growing confusion. The human fleet approaching Kaleth space didn't look like any military formation he had studied in the war colleges. "Analysis?" he demanded from his tactical officer. "Unknown, War Commander. Our sensors detect approximately 3,000 vessels, but their configurations don't match any known military doctrine. Many appear to be civilian craft that have been modified." Vec's crystalline features reflected his contempt. "Civilians pretending to be warriors. This will be over quickly." He was wrong about many things, but he was right about it being over quickly. Fleet Commander Baum led the first wave of human ships into Kaleth space. Her vessel had been a cargo hauler 3 weeks ago. Now it bristled with missile pods and carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Around her, hundreds of similar ships moved in patterns that defied every military textbook ever written. "All units, remember your training. she broadcast to the fleet. "We're not here to conquer territory, we're here to send a message." The human ships didn't form the traditional battle lines that Caliph commanders expected. Instead, they swarmed, like living creatures, each vessel in constant communication with dozens of others. When the Caliph opened fire, they found themselves shooting at empty space as the human formation flowed around their attacks like water. Engineer Juan had spent sleepless nights converting civilian vessels into weapons of war. Mining ships became siege platforms. Passenger liners became mobile bases. Even luxury yachts carried military-grade sensors and communication arrays. The beauty of it, she had explained to her team, is that we're not building a military. We're turning our entire civilization into a weapon. The first engagement lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, 12 Caliph warships had been reduced to floating debris, and the human fleet hadn't lost a single vessel. War Commander Vec stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. "How is this possible? They're using civilian ships." "War Commander," his sensor operator reported, "our weapons can't lock onto them. Their movement patterns are too complex. It's like they're all controlled by a single mind." That was closer to the truth than Vec realized. Every human ship was linked to every other through quantum communication networks that updated thousands of times per second. They didn't just coordinate their actions, they thought as one organism. Captain Nam was leading the rescue mission to find the captured crew of the Harmony. His ship, the Pathfinder, had been modified with the most advanced scanning equipment humanity could produce. What he found in the Caliph prison facilities changed everything. Captain Jiho was barely alive. Commander Minho had been subjected to weeks of interrogation under torture. Engineer Sora showed signs of medical experimentation. Dr. Yuna was unconscious, her body bearing evidence of systematic abuse. "Medical teams to the rescue site immediately," Nam broadcast, "and send word to Admiral Hyun. She needs to see this." The message that went out to every human vessel in Caliph space was simple. They tortured our people. What had been a rescue mission became something else entirely. Admiral Hyun received the medical reports while coordinating the siege of the Caliph home system. The clinical language couldn't hide the horror of what had been done to 4 innocent explorers who had offered nothing but help. "Signal all fleet commanders," she ordered. "We are authorized for Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was something that had been discussed in classified briefings but never implemented. It was the systematic dismantling of an entire civilization's military capability. Commander Ray brought her stealth ships out of hiding, revealing surveillance assets that had been watching Caliph space for weeks. "Target assessment complete," she reported. "We have cataloged every military installation, every shipyard, every weapons manufacturing facility in the Empire." The second phase of the human response began with surgical precision. Caliph military bases simply stopped existing, reduced to their component atoms by weapons that struck faster than light. Shipyards found their construction facilities melted into slag. Weapons depots experienced contained explosions that left perfect spheres of empty space where they had once stood. Captain June, commanding his converted mining vessel, watched a Caliph fleet base disappear in a flash of light. "Control, this is Mining Ship 77. Target eliminated. No civilian casualties detected." That was the terrifying precision of the human attack. Not one civilian had been harmed. Not one non-military facility had been touched. But every piece of Caliph military infrastructure was being systematically destroyed. War Commander Vec tried to rally his remaining forces, but found himself fighting an enemy that seemed to know his every move before he made it. Human ships appeared where they couldn't possibly be, struck with impossible accuracy and vanished before return fire could reach them. "They're everywhere," his tactical officer reported. "Every system, every planet, every trade route." "How many ships do they have?" The answer was simpler than the Caliph could comprehend. Humanity had converted its entire spacefaring civilization into a military force. Every merchant captain was now a warrior. Every transport pilot was now a soldier. Every civilian with access to a spacecraft was now part of the largest military mobilization in galactic history. Dr. Kai led the teams that followed the military strikes. Her job was more complex than destruction. It was transformation. Every piece of Kaleth technology more advanced than basic industrial equipment was carefully dismantled and removed. "We're not destroying their civilization," she explained to her teams. "We're giving them a chance to rebuild it better." The systematic reduction of Kaleth military power took exactly 47 days. At the end of that time, the Kaleth Empire possessed no space-capable warships, no orbital weapons platforms, no faster-than-light communication systems, and no manufacturing capability for military equipment. They were, essentially, reduced to a pre-space civilization overnight. General Hanna oversaw the final phase of the operation from her command ship, orbiting the Kaleth homeworld. The planetary population looked up at skies now filled with human vessels, but those ships made no move to attack civilian targets. Instead, they began broadcasting a message in the Kaleth language. "Your military has been neutralized. Your people are unharmed. You will be given the opportunity to rebuild your civilization along peaceful lines. Violence against other species will not be tolerated." War Commander Vec, now simply Commander Vec of a non-existent fleet, was brought aboard the human flagship under a flag of truce. What he saw there would haunt him for the rest of his life. The human command center was filled with beings who looked nothing like the warriors he had expected. They were scientists, engineers, doctors, teachers, civilians who had transformed themselves into the most effective military force he had ever witnessed. Admiral Hyun looked at him with eyes that held no hatred, only a terrible sadness. "Your people will be allowed to rebuild," she told him, "but they will rebuild as something better than what they were." "You could have destroyed us completely," Vec said, his voice hollow with defeat. "Yes," Hyun agreed. "But that would have taught the galaxy nothing except that humans are as violent as anyone else. Instead, they will learn that we are something far more dangerous. We are people who refuse to allow evil to flourish." As human ships began establishing monitoring stations throughout former Kaleth space, a message went out on all galactic frequencies. The Kaleth Empire chose violence over diplomacy, conquest over coexistence. This is the consequence. Any species that preys upon the innocent will receive the same education. The galaxy listened in stunned silence. Humanity hadn't just defeated the Kaleth Empire, they had transformed it into something entirely new. Not through genocide or conquest, but through the kind of systematic reformation that no other species had ever attempted. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't seeking to rule the galaxy. They were appointing themselves its teachers, and the I lesson they taught was simple. Civilizations that chose violence would learn to choose differently, or they would lose the ability to choose at all. The message reached Admiral Hyun's flagship while she was reviewing routine patrol reports in the outer system defense grid. She had been expecting updates on asteroid mining operations and trade route security. What appeared on her screen instead made her blood run cold. "Emergency signal from Captain Jiho's exploration vessel," her communication officer reported. "First contact protocols have failed. They report being under attack by an alien species." Hyun was already moving toward the bridge command center. "Get me direct links to Colonial Command fleet operations and deep space intelligence. Priority Alpha protocols now." Within minutes, the message was spreading through human space like ripples in a pond. But these ripples carried a weight that no other species in the galaxy would have understood. Humans had been preparing for this moment for generations, though they had hoped it would never come. On Mars, Governor Tay received the alert while meeting with mining consortium leaders. He immediately activated planetary defense protocols and began redirecting industrial capacity toward military production. Every human ship, every transport, every mining vessel, he told his emergency council. If it can carry weapons or personnel, it gets retrofitted immediately. On Europa Station, Captain Day was reviewing long-range sensor reports when the flash message arrived. As commander of humanity's most classified military project, he was one of the few people who truly understood what this moment meant. "Signal the Ghost Fleet," he ordered his second-in-command. "Tell them it's time to reveal themselves." For decades, human deep space vessels had been mapping the galaxy in secret, not just exploring, but watching, learning. cataloging the positions and capabilities of every major civilization they could find. Most humans believed their species was alone in the galaxy, but their leaders had known better. Dr. Yoon, humanity's leading expert on theoretical alien psychology, was pulled from her research lab to address the Emergency Defense Council that convened within hours of the message's receipt. The fact that they attacked a clearly non-threatening science vessel tells us everything we need to know about their mindset, she explained to the assembled military leaders. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a cultural conflict. This was predatory behavior. Admiral Hyun nodded grimly. What's our response doctrine for this scenario? The Kaleth have made the same mistake that human predators used to make, Dr. Yoon replied. They assume we think like them. They assume we'll treat this as a political problem, something to be negotiated over or traded away. She brought up a holographic display showing human population centers throughout the solar system and beyond. They don't understand that they haven't just attacked 4 humans. They've attacked our family. Every human in space will consider this a personal attack on their loved ones. The response was already beginning. On Earth itself, factories that had been producing consumer goods began retooling for military equipment. Civilian cargo vessels reported to shipyards for armor plating and weapon installations. The entire human economy was shifting into a configuration that the rest of the galaxy had never seen before. Captain Nam, commanding a long-range scout ship near the galactic core, received updated orders that made him smile grimly. All ships were changing mission parameters. Find the Kaleth Empire, map their defenses, locate their population centers, and find where they're keeping our people. The human response wasn't following any military doctrine known to galactic civilization. Most species would have begun with diplomatic protests, demands for the return of their citizens, negotiations for compensation. Some might have threatened limited military action against specific targets. Humanity did none of these things. Instead, they began gathering information with the systematic thoroughness of a species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of war. Every human ship in space received new orders. Some were told to return to base for military conversion. Others were told to begin scouting runs into unknown space. The most disturbing orders went to ships that most humans didn't know existed. Commander Ray received her sealed instructions aboard the stealth vessel Nightfall, currently observing a major galactic trade route from a position that should have been impossible to reach undetected. Begin Intelligence Protocol 7, her orders read. Full-spectrum surveillance of all Kaleth military assets. Prepare for systematic neutralization of enemy capabilities. Throughout human space, similar preparations were taking place with a speed and coordination that would have shocked galactic observers. This wasn't a government mobilizing its military. This was an entire species deciding that a line had been crossed. Ship Captain June, commanding a mining vessel in the asteroid belt, received orders to report to the nearest military depot. Convert your cargo holds for troop transport. The by message read. Modify your mining lasers for combat applications. Are we really going to war over 4 people? Asked his chief engineer. June looked at him with an expression that the engineer would remember for the rest of his life. They aren't just 4 people. They're our people. And every human in the galaxy needs to know that when one of us is threatened, all of us respond. The mobilization was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Other species went to war with their militaries, leaving their civilian populations to continue normal life. Humanity was going to war as a single organism. Dr. Wan, a civilian engineer who had never served in the military, found herself designing weapon modifications for cargo ships. We need to make them understand, she told her team, that when you attack humans, you're not fighting an army. You're fighting an entire civilization. As reports flooded in from across human space, Admiral Hyun began to understand the scope of what was happening. Mining ships were becoming missile platforms. Passenger liners were being converted to troop transports. Research vessels were being equipped with surveillance equipment that could penetrate any known stealth technology. How long until we're ready? She asked her staff. For what, Admiral? Full mobilization? 3 weeks. But if you're asking how long until we can begin operations, her intelligence chief smiled coldly. We can begin tomorrow. The Ghost Fleet has been tracking Kaleth ship movements for the past 18 hours. The message that went out on all human frequencies was simple. Our people have been taken by a hostile alien empire. We are going to get them back. All humans are to consider themselves on active duty until this crisis is resolved. There were no protests, no debates about whether 4 people were worth a war. Every human who heard the message understood something that the Kaleth Empire couldn't comprehend. Humanity didn't negotiate with kidnappers. As the first human battle fleets began forming up for the journey to Kaleth space, deep space monitoring, stations across the galaxy started picking up unusual readings. Ships were moving, lots of ships, more ships than any single species was supposed to possess. The Kaleth Empire, confident in their superiority and busy planning their conquest of human space, had no idea what was coming for them. They had captured 4 humans and thought they had gained valuable intelligence about a primitive species. Instead, they had triggered the response of a civilization that viewed the protection of its people as more important than their own lives. The Tamper galaxy was about to learn why humanity had spread across the stars not as conquerors, but as guardians, and why threatening even one human was considered an act of war against them all. Captain Jiho floated in the zero gravity of his ship's bridge, watching the strange readings on his scanner. The exploration vessel Harmony was 3 days out from Earth's moon, testing new deep space communication arrays. What they had found, instead, was something no human had ever seen before. "Captain, I'm getting clearer signals from the unknown vessel," reported Commander Minho from his station. "It appears to be in distress. Life support systems are failing." Jiho pushed himself over to look at the data directly. His crew had trained for years for this possibility, but now that it was actually happening, everything felt surreal. First, contact with an alien species, the moment that would change human history forever. "Sora, what's your assessment?" he asked the ship's engineer. Sora pulled up a 3-dimensional display of the alien craft. It was unlike anything in human design philosophy. All curves and flowing lines where human ships were angular and practical. "Their power systems are definitely failing, Captain. From what I can tell, they're running on emergency reserves. Maybe 6 hours left before complete shutdown. Any response to our communication attempts?" "Nothing we can understand," Minho replied. "But they're definitely trying to talk to us. The computer is working on patterns now." Jiho made his decision. "All right, people, this is what we trained for. Minho, prepare a rescue shuttle. Sora, see if we can extend our docking tube to their ship. Yuna, get medical ready for possible alien physiology." Dr. Yuna, the ship's medical officer, was already pulling up theoretical files on xenobiology. "Captain, we have no idea what their atmospheric requirements are, what they eat, or even if our medicine would help or harm them." "I know. We'll figure it out as we go. The important thing is that there are living beings in trouble out there, and we're going to help them if we can." It took 4 hours of careful work, but eventually they managed to establish a connection between the 2 ships. The aliens had finally responded to human mathematical communications, prime numbers, basic physics constants, things that should be universal. When the airlock opened, Jiho got his first look at an alien species. They were tall, taller than any human, with skin that shifted between deep purple and silver depending on the light. Their faces were angular, almost crystalline in structure, with large eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The lead alien stepped forward and made a series of complex gestures. The translation computer, working overtime, managed to put together a rough meaning. "Gratitude for assistance. We are Kaleth. You are unknown species." Jiho smiled and gestured to himself. "Human, I am Captain Jiho. We are glad to help." More gestures, more rough translations. The aliens, the Kaleth, explained that their ship had been damaged in an asteroid field. Their distress beacon had been broadcasting for days with no response from their own people. They had begun to fear they would die alone in the void. "We can repair your ship," Jiho offered. "Our engineer Sora is very skilled. Or we can take you to safety if you prefer." The lead Kaleth, who had identified himself as war leader Thek, seemed to consider this. His large eyes studied the human crew with an intensity that made them uncomfortable. "Your ship is small," Thek finally communicated. "Your weapons are few, yet you offer aid to strangers." Jiho nodded. "That's what people do. When someone is in trouble, you help them." Something changed in Thek's expression. The other Kaleth crew members began to spread out through the human ship, their movements casual but somehow predatory. "Your navigation systems," Thek gestured toward the bridge controls. "They show many worlds. Your species has expanded far." "We have colonies on several planets and moons," Jiho confirmed, not yet sensing the danger. "Nothing like some of the great civilizations we imagine must exist out there among the stars." Thek's eyes glittered. "Show us." It was Sora who first realized what was happening. She had been working on the Kaleth ship's power systems when she noticed something odd. The ship wasn't as badly damaged as they had claimed. In fact, most of the failures could be easily repaired from inside the ship. She activated her comm unit. "Captain, I think we have a problem." But when she tried to return to the Harmony, she found Kaleth warriors blocking her path. They weren't making threatening gestures, but their intent was clear. On the bridge of the Harmony, Thek was studying the human navigation charts with obvious interest. More Kaleth had appeared, and Jiho realized they now outnumbered his crew, 2-1. "War leader Thek," Jiho said carefully, "is there something else you need from us?" Thek turned to face him, and now there was no mistaking the predatory gleam in his crystalline features. "Your species interests me, human Jiho. You offer aid without asking for payment. You show your weaknesses to strangers. You reveal the locations of your worlds to those you have just met." Commander Minho's hand moved slowly toward the emergency controls, but Kaleth warriors were already moving to intercept him. "Among my people," Thek continued, "such behavior would be considered foolishness. The weak exist to serve the strong. The naive exist to be educated by their superiors." "I see," Jiho said quietly. "And what education did you have in mind?" "Your technology is primitive but interesting. Your ship designs show potential. Your star charts reveal the locations of undefended worlds." Thek gestured and his warriors moved forward. "My empire will find great use for all of this." Dr. Yuna found herself separated from her medical equipment, surrounded by aliens who now looked at her with the calculating gaze of predators sizing up prey. Sora was trapped on the alien ship with no way to warn her crewmates. Minho was held at the navigation station, forced to explain human stellar cartography. As Kaleth restraints were placed around his wrists, Jiho looked directly at Thek. "You're making a mistake, war leader." Thek laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "What mistake could I possibly make? Your ship is captured. Your crew is my prisoners. Your charts will guide my fleets to easy conquests." "You mistake kindness for weakness," Jiho said. "That will be your empire's greatest mistake." Empty words from a defeated primitive. Thek turned to his warriors. "Secure their vessel. We return to Kaleth space immediately." But Minho had managed one last action before being captured. His fingers had found the emergency beacon controls. Not a distress call, something else entirely. A message that would be picked up by every human monitoring station, every deep space relay, every ship and colony and research station in human space. The message was simple. First contact protocols have failed. Humanity has been attacked. Repeat. We are under attack by an alien species calling themselves Kaleth. As the Kaleth ship began moving toward their empire's territory with the captured Harmony in tow, that message raced across human space at faster than light speeds. It reached Mars colonies and asteroid mining stations. It reached the research bases in the outer planets and the deep space exploration fleets. Most importantly, it reached the hidden monitoring posts that most humans didn't even know existed. The deep space listening posts that had been watching and cataloging every radio signal, every energy signature, every sign of intelligent life in the galaxy for decades. Jiho, locked in a Kaleth holding cell with his crew, had no way of knowing what his civilization's response would be. He only knew that the Kaleth had fundamentally misunderstood something about humanity. They thought they had captured 4 humans and learned the locations of a few dozen worlds. They had no idea that they had just declared war on a species that viewed every human life as precious beyond measure. As the Caleth ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying its human prisoners toward an empire that thought it had found easy prey, the galaxy was about to learn why some mistakes can never be undone. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched far beyond what most eyes could see. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds sat in curved rows that rose like a mountain toward the crystal dome ceiling. The air hummed with translation devices, working in overdrive, turning alien thoughts into words that every species could understand. Ambassador Kira stood at the center podium, her blue skin glowing with confidence. She represented the Nexus Empire, one of the newer powers trying to make their mark among the stars. Her proposal was simple and, to her mind, obvious. "Honored council members," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "The Nexus Empire requests permission to expand into the Outer Rim territories. Specifically, we wish to claim the third planet in the Sol system." A few scattered murmurs rippled through the crowd. Most species paid little attention to the Outer Rim. It was far from the major trade routes, far from the important worlds. Nothing out there seemed worth fighting over. Kira continued, pulling up a holographic display that showed a small blue and green world. "Our scouts report that this planet, called Earth by its inhabitants, has abundant resources and a primitive population. The dominant species there has barely achieved basic spaceflight. They pose no threat to galactic stability." She paused, expecting the usual bureaucratic discussions about territorial claims and resource rights. Instead, the Great Hall fell completely silent. Even the constant hum of translation devices seemed to quiet. Then, slowly, an ancient figure rose from the front row. Elder Roth of the Coalition was old even by the standards of his long-lived species. His face bore the deep lines of someone who had seen too much of war and not enough of peace. "You speak of the humans as if they were cattle to be herded, Elder," Roth said. His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the hall. "Every species in this council knows the truth. Humans are off limits." Kira laughed. The sound echoed strangely in the silent chamber. "With respect, Elder, those are old stories from a different time. Surely we cannot let ancient superstitions guide modern policy. What could one backward species possibly do to threaten an empire?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Several species representatives who had been lounging in their seats now sat up straight. A few actually moved their chairs back, as if distance might protect them from what was coming. Another figure stood. Elder Voss of the Titan hegemony was massive even among his warrior species. His people were known throughout the galaxy as unstoppable fighters, but even he spoke with careful respect when discussing this topic. "Young Ambassador," Elder Voss rumbled, "you were not alive during the Purge Wars. You did not witness the sector-wide devastation. You did not see what happens when humanity decides that a species has gone too far." Kira looked around the chamber, confusion replacing her earlier confidence. "I don't understand. Our intelligence reports show that humans have only a few dozen worlds. Their ships are slow compared to ours. Their weapons are primitive. How could they possibly threaten anyone?" Elder Roth activated another holographic display. This one showed a vast section of space marked in red. Warning beacons blinked steadily throughout the region, broadcasting in every known galactic language. The space looked empty, dead. "This was once the Caleth Empire," Elder Roth explained. 300 worlds spanning 12 systems, over 60 billion souls. They were a proud warrior race, much like your own people. They believed that might made right, that the strong should rule over the weak." He paused, letting the implications sink in. They made first contact with humanity 847 standard years ago. The humans offered friendship, trade, cultural exchange. The Caleth saw weakness to be exploited. The display changed, showing archived footage of sleek Caleth warships. They were impressive vessels built for conquest and domination. Their crews were trained from birth to be perfect warriors. The Caleth captured a human diplomatic vessel. They tortured the crew for information about human technology and defenses. They planned to use this knowledge to conquer Earth and enslave its population. Kira shifted uncomfortably. But surely the humans fought back. Surely they defended themselves. Elder Voss let out what might have been a laugh, if laughter could sound so cold. Oh, they defended themselves. But not in any way the Kaleth expected. Not in any way anyone expected. A new voice spoke from the shadows of the upper levels. The humans didn't send armies. They didn't declare war in the traditional sense. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Elder Quinn of the Observer Guild, a species that made it their business to record and remember galactic history. If the observers were talking about something, it was important. The humans sent a message, Elder Quinn continued. A single transmission broadcast on all frequencies in every known language. It simply said, "Those who prey upon the innocent will learn why the galaxy fears us." The silence stretched on. Kira found herself holding her breath without knowing. Why? What happened to them? She asked, though part of her no longer wanted to know. Elder Roth manipulated the display again. Now it showed the same region of space, but from different time periods. The progression was clear and terrifying. Over the course of 2 standard years, every Kaleth installation, every ship, every sign of advanced civilization simply disappeared. The humans didn't destroy them, Elder Roth said quietly. That would have been mercy. Instead, they systematically dismantled the entire Kaleth Empire. Every piece of technology more advanced than a simple combustion engine was reduced to its component atoms. But the people, Kira whispered, still alive, still on their worlds, but reduced to a pre-industrial state. The humans left them with one message, broadcast continuously from orbital stations. Learn to live in peace. When you prove you can coexist without conquest, the restrictions will be lifted. Elder Voss nodded grimly. They've been rebuilding for 8 centuries now, slowly, carefully, learning to grow food instead of weapons, to create art instead of warships. The humans watch them constantly, helping them become better than they were. The implications hit Kira like a physical blow. You mean the humans are still watching, still patrolling, still ready to respond to threats against innocent species? Elder Roth's expression was grave. Ambassador, there isn't a fleet movement, a territorial dispute, or a diplomatic crisis anywhere in the galaxy that humans aren't aware of. They don't interfere in our politics, but they ensure that no species ever again faces extinction at the hands of another. A small sound made everyone turn. A human had entered the chamber. She was unremarkable compared to many of the alien species present. Average height, brown hair, wearing simple clothes that marked her as a scientist rather than a warrior. Dr. Maya, humanity's representative to the council, walked calmly to the center of the hall. When she spoke, her voice was gentle, almost motherly. Ambassador Kira, your expansion proposal has been noted and filed. Perhaps your empire would be interested in peaceful trade relations instead. Humanity has developed some interesting agricultural techniques that might benefit your growing colonies. The offer was made with such casual friendliness that it took a moment for the threat underneath to sink in. This small, seemingly harmless human had just made it clear that humanity knew exactly what the Nexus Empire was planning, where their colonies were, and what they needed to survive. Kira found herself nodding before she could stop herself. Yes, trade relations would be beneficial. Dr. Maya smiled. Wonderful. I'll have our Commerce Department contact you. They're very good at finding mutually beneficial arrangements. As the human representative took her seat, Kira looked around the chamber one more time. Every species representative was looking at her with something between pity and relief. They had watched another ambitious empire learn the same lesson that every galactic power had learned over the past 8 centuries. Humans were off limits. Not because they were weak, not because they hid behind others for protection, because they had appointed themselves the guardians of the galaxy, and no one had yet proven strong enough to stop them.